It's now time for our main event with your host, Chris Tetrold Blaine. Welcome to Once Upon a Turnbuckle.
Welcome back to another episode of Once Upon a Turnbuckle. And if you thought that a couple of episodes ago when we spoke to the legend that is Cowboy Scott Casey, that the guests couldn't get any bigger, count yourself wrong. Because I have with me today one of the larger-than-life characters from the early 90s, someone that I grew up watching. I'm so excited for this. So a UK yo, baby, yo. Welcome to Paul Neu, better known as P.N. News. Hello, sir.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it, man. That's a pretty nice introduction.
Thank you.
I don't feel, I don't feel larger than life. But okay, I'm big, I'm bad, I'm nationwide, and I'm 400 pounds. But that doesn't make me larger than life. But that's cool.
There you go. That's kind of what you appeared, to someone my age when I was 7 when I got into wrestling back in the early 90s, sort of when you were around. Cool. So, to a kid that age, guys like yourself were kind of mesmerizing really for your size and your we'll get into your career in a bit anyway, and we'll touch on
none of us are ever anything without the fans, that's for sure.
There you go. Thank you. That's so good for you to say, mate. It's so good to have you on. I have got a bunch of things that I want to cover if I can in the time that we've got. You've had such a varied and great career that I want to try and cover, span all of it if we can. But really sort of
try not to lie too much.
just however you want to play it, really. I'm open for complete honesty. So, just however you want to do it. But the easiest thing to do probably is to wind it right back to the beginning, because the purpose of why I started this podcast is my love for a particular era of wrestling, which is the one I grew up with. So where did you discover wrestling? Sort of, before you got in the ring, where was it that it began for you, that you discovered it for yourself?
Well, it was like, it came on. I grew up in Northeast Nebraska, which, I don't know, your British fans might not know where it's at, but Nebraska is the center of the United States. Mm-hmm. God's country is what I like to call it. We're the inventors of Arbor Day. So, that's one of our big things. The whole Mormon Trail ran through our area. I wasn't alive back then, but to get to the point where you were saying it, I used to get, like, after church on Sundays, I used to get professional wrestling out of Minneapolis, the AWA, Vern Gagne and that stuff. I used to get that on Sunday morning. And that's how I first had my early introduction to the wrestling industry. And then, because I was in a small town, we were one of the first towns to get like cable television, and one of the first, one of the big channels was TBS, and then they had 2 hours of wrestling on Saturday afternoons, afternoon evenings, and then they had 1 hour or 2 hours on Sunday. So when I started in the AWA, I started with the AWA, but soon in the late 70s, early 80s, then I started getting interested into then what was called Georgia Championship Wrestling, which was affiliated with the NWA. Harley Race was the champion when I first started watching it, and then Tommy Rich got the belt, and then it was Flair that ended up with the belt. And that was the time, and I was like, I was getting into my early teens and stuff like that about when that was happening.
Awesome. Was there anyone in particular, you mentioned a couple of names there, Harley Race and Ric Flair and that, was there anyone in particular you gravitated towards who you would credit with getting you interested that you wanted to do it?
No, not really. The thing is the first heel that ever really bothered me, and I'm saying a heel, a villain, or whatever you want to call it. The first person that really got underneath my skin was the Masked Superstar.
Okay.
And Bill Eadie, right? And he got underneath my skin, and I was really upset about him, right? But nobody really ever did it. I was just watching it because I thought it was pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
But I never had anybody I really looked up to. But I remember watching Jerry Blackwell. I remember watching all these American talent and stuff like that. as the industry was playing on television. And yeah, it was just interesting, but I can't credit anybody. It was more about what I can credit is some of my high school buddies when we were like when we had choir, and when we were down in choir, we usually were practicing backdrops and body slams and doing all sorts of stuff. And it was more, and then when I was in track, we would practice backdrops in the high the pole vault pit and all stuff like that.
It's like extracurricular activity.
Extracurricular activity. That's kind of what got me interested in wrestling, because some people thought, oh, you should be a professional wrestler, but it wasn't until I was, I played a year of college football, and then I was gonna continue my college career at another college, and then I ended up taking a sabbatical that summer and going to visit some friends of mine I met on spring break up in Madison, Wisconsin. And I ended up bouncing in a bar up there. And one night I threw out like 4 guys out of the bar at one time, all on my own. The other doormen were busy on the other door. And what happened was there was a state treasurer's convention there in Madison that day. And a bunch of the state treasurers came off the Capitol, because we were just off the Capitol building, came off the Capitol and came into the bar at about 7, and they stayed longer and were drinking and having a good time. And we had like a crowd. Our crowd went from like business people, lawyers, politicians. They'd come in earlier in the evening, and then it would filter on, and then later with college kids would come in, right? And then you get some other people coming in besides college kids, and then it would kick off. And college kids and working people, they don't get along all the time. And so there was attitude, and this guy ended up like the guy taking a cheap shot. I've got him split up, and then the guy took a cheap shot over my shoulder, and then he tried to run out of the bar, right? Like he wasn't going to get caught by me. I ended up doing a Starsky and Hutch over the trunk of his big Lincoln Town car that was out front, right? And I tackled him in the street, and I got up and I said, "Don't you ever come back into my bar while I'm here," right?
Yeah.
And I went back in, and you see there were these big windows in front on both sides, the upper half and the lower half. When I came back in the bar, the place erupted like at a wrestling arena. Awesome. It was just crazy, man. And then the state treasurer of Minnesota, he ended up telling me. He ended up going, "Hey, you ever thought about being a professional wrestler?" And I went, "No." But I called him about 5 months later, and he hooked me up, and he sponsored me through my training camp at Brad Rangan's up there in Plymouth, Minnesota, and stuff like that. And I actually went through the school after the training camp after Bull Power, or him as Van Vader, and the Nasty Boys were in the camp before me. And I was the only guy in the camp that later that year that actually ended up having a career in the industry. So
wow. So did you know of Leon White, Van Vader, and the Nasties at that point, or was it later?
No, at that point I met him the first time when he just come back from Europe, and he was doing some jobs again for Vern, right?
Okay.
So I was doing his stuff, and then and that's when I met him the first time. But the Nasty Boys kind of helped train us, so I knew who they were, right? And then as I got into the industry, with the help of the state treasurer getting me publicity before I even stepped in the ring and all this stuff, before I even got in there, they were helping out the Rock and Roll, not the Rock and Roll Express, but the Rockers. Michaels and Janetti came in, and they were working with us. Guy named Drew Tossel, and of course Brad Rangens and stuff. So there was a lot of guys that came through and would do stuff with us. So it was a pretty good education for me. Absolutely. And but I met Leon the first time when he was at one of the shows, and then I met his boss in Germany, Otto Vance. I met him out in Vegas at my first television. I'd only had 3 wrestling matches before I did my first TV.
Wow.
for AWA. And then that's where I met Otto Wanz, which later, about a year later, I ended up coming to Germany for Otto Wanz via, it was actually via Fujinami, who Fujinami saw me wrestle out in Portland, Oregon, and he said, "Oh, you next Bam Bam Bigelow Japan," and Bigelow was in New York at the time, so I didn't want to be the next Bam Bigelow. I just wanted to be myself. But that was my first trip over to New Japan at that point. So.
That's very cool. It's funny you should bring up Bam Bam Bigelow, actually, because I was watching a few of your matches online to prepare for this, and it reminded me, actually, especially when I was growing up, I loved the big guys like yourself that could move. You have some big men who were really slow and they didn't really do a lot in the ring. But Bam Bam Bigelow and yourself, I mean, you reminded me a lot in the ring. Did he have any kind of influence on you, or is it just kind of
none whatsoever? We'd always been compared to each other throughout. I don't know. He's dead now, so you can't ask him that question.
No,
but people would always use us in comparison, in conversation. And I did it. I finally got. I was like his third last match or the 13th last match or something like that before he died. I finally got to wrestle him in Hanover, Germany for the EWP. Cool. We did a title match, and he put me over for the belt that day.
Oh wow, that's a big moment.
Yeah,
that's a big moment. Good. That's awesome. So yeah, let's talk about when you first started off. Obviously, you touched on a few things, but your sort of your personas before you got to be in P.N. News. What was your early kind of?
I was wrestling when I first got into AWA. I was wrestling as Paul the Avalanche Neu, and then I just became the Avalanche when I went out to Portland, Oregon, working for Don Owens. The Pacific Northwest was an NWA affiliate, and I started working out there as Avalanche. And then when I was there as the Avalanche, and then I went to Germany for the first time. Mm-hmm. And in Germany, then Otto decided he wanted to call me Paul the Grizzly, right? So then it went from Paul the Grizzly, and then they saw how quick I was, and I was throwing these drop kicks, and I was hitting splashes off the top rope. And my explosiveness, they said, Peter Williams came up with the name. He says, we're going to call you Kanunenkugeln Grizzly. I went, what the fuck is a Kanunenkugeln? I'm sorry if this is a PG.
No, don't worry. No.
But I said, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is that? And he goes, well, it's like a cannonball. It's like a shot. You move like a shot out of a cannon. And I said, then just call me Cannonball Grizzly because it's way better, right? And he kept calling me Kanunenkugeln. But every time I get on the microphone, I always call myself Cannonball Grizzly. Finally, Cannonball stuck, and then he started calling me Cannonball Grizzly. And but as I was going to Japan, because Fujinami met me as Avalanche, they were calling me Avalanche over in Japan. And that was like, we're talking 87 till like 1990 when I went into the WCW. And when I went in there and got my dark match, I had my gimmick. The idea for the whole thing was I knew I wanted the rap and wrestler. The whole gimmick was my idea, right?
Okay.
But I was wearing these Bermuda shorts, and I had like colorful outfit on, the cool sunglasses and the heavy chains and everything like that. I kind of patterned myself out from the Fat Boys, right?
Yeah.
Because I came up with a tag gimmick. Me and Buddy Rose tagged up in Portland. The whole gimmick was my idea. I said, why don't we call ourselves the Beach Boys? Because I had bleach blonde hair at the time. And Buddy had his, Dutch boy finger in the dike haircut, right?
Yeah.
And Lenny Denton, the grappler, he loved the idea. Buddy wasn't so begeistred about it, but but we ended up working, and it went really well. And so I still had the Bermuda shorts and everything like that. And so I was wearing that gimmick, and I said, well, let's call it. I thought PJ Cool, that's just like a 80s kind of name, right?
Yeah.
Paul James is my middle name, so I call it, Paul James, and then Cool. And then Dusty came up with the idea to call me P.N. News because it was CN News was big, was Ted Turner's big thing, and we were working for Turner basically. Yeah. And so he said, hey baby, we're gonna call you PNN or PN News, just like CNN and CN News. People are gonna be able to correlate the problem. You see what I'm saying, baby? I said, sure, just pay me, Dusty. and that's kind of how PN News came about. But it was pretty cool. I just wish I would have had more help with the raps at the beginning, because I didn't have a playback speaker at the ring. Right. So I had to get used to the fact, and it took me about a month to do this. I had to get used to the fact. So I did like 20 TVs without being able to do this, right? So I admit my raps sucked. And but the reason why is because the sound, you'd be in these big arenas, right? And so the speakers aren't right next to you. They're way up in the boondocks.
Yeah.
And I'd start my rap, and then I'd hear myself like a half a second later, and it would just throw me off because I had no playback speaker.
Yeah.
And if I'd had the playback speaker, I wouldn't have had that delay, and I'd have been able to continue my rap. And it was screwed me up until I got used to that. I really sucked. And by the time I got used to that, they just stopped me from rapping.
I think at the time, again, speaking just really from a fan, this was when I kind of saw the fact that you were. Did you write your raps, by the way, or were they written for you?
Yeah, I had help. I had help from a staffer that helped me write some raps and stuff like that. Yeah. A couple I came up with my own, but I had some help with the raps and stuff like that. So
for me, it made you more noticeable, because obviously in the WWF, you had Jimmy Hart kind of on the megaphone on the way to the ring and everything. He made himself known. I couldn't really put my finger on anyone else who was vocally doing anything in the ring right before the match. Yeah. Obviously later on, when you got people like Max Payne and Mammoth and Rock, started with a guitar thing, and Men on a Mission. Do you believe your gimmick just quickly influenced?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I went to my daughter was going to be born, and she was on the way in the end of 2002, and she was born in September 2000, or not 2002, but 93, right? Mm-hmm. I went back to the States because I moved back to Europe. And I went back to the States, and Slaughter was in charge of new talent at the time, Sergeant Slaughter. And he goes, "Where you been? We've been trying to get a hold of you to do this gimmick." Right. So they wanted me to be, I don't know if it was, they wanted me to do the rap gimmick. I had actually, the day I signed my contract with WCW, there was a message on my phone waiting for me where it was Youngblood, Youngblood, he goes, "Vince loves the gimmick. He wants you to start immediately. Call Pat Patterson Monday morning."
No way.
I just signed that Sunday. I just signed my contract on Sunday at the Omni. I shouldn't have took the damn thing with me because they gave it to me on Friday. I shouldn't have took it with me. I should have waited and came back, and then hindsight's 2020, right?
It's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, what do you? Looking back on
that's the thing it's never about your talent, dude. It's being about in the right place at the right time is all 100% the thing. When I'll give you an example, when Jimmy Snuka, when his girlfriend died in the he was going to get that push. He was going to get the Hogan push.
Yeah, right.
And it ended up going to Hogan because there was too much heat on Jimmy. So I mean, that's what I heard. But telephone, telegraph, tell a wrestler. I don't know how much that is true, but that's kind of what I heard.
It fits, doesn't it? I mean, I was like, you could believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a true believer that you got to be in the right place at the right time, and that's it. Austin went to New York at the right time. Rock was there at the right time. All these people were there. Everybody is the right time, right place. So.
What year was that? Was that when you signed with WCW back in the beginning of the 90s?
That was 91. Yeah.
So what do you, looking back on it, do you have any sort of theories about what they would have done with you and how your run would have gone there? Or is it just,
I probably would have got that. I probably would have got that Men on a Mission push, right? Yeah. That's probably what would have happened,
It happened a few years earlier.
And but whether it's all hindsight, and it's all it's 2020, and it didn't happen, so I've got no regrets. Life is what it is. You know what I mean? It's
looking at your WCW stint. I mean, you weren't working with shabby names in there at all. If you rattle off just a few, you had a little thing going with a guy called Stunning Steve Austin, for example.
Yeah.
Arn
Yeah,
Anderson,
I
Ron
mean,
Simmons.
but I work with Ron. I work with Dick Murdoch. I took over. I did a couple matches where Scotty tore his bicep. I was down and that's how I got over with Dick Murdoch so well. Is I ended up taking Scotty's place when he tore his bicep, and we were in Jacksonville, Florida. And I had to step in that tag match, and he was working. I called them the Dirty Dicks. I can't remember what they were called, but it was Dick Slater and Dick Murdoch.
Oh yeah. I remember.
And then I had a great match, and I did the sell, and then Rick made the comeback, and everybody and I became really good friends with Dick Murdoch after that, and then he booked me down to Puerto Rico and everything and all sorts of things after that. But Dick was a big supporter and a big fan of mine, and I was, of course, a big fan of his. Guys like him. I mean, in Europe, I ended up working, and that's how I got to WCW. I was working with Moondog Rex, Randy Colley.
Okay.
And he got me, and it was Dusty didn't have the book. It was Ole Anderson had the book, and we called him from Germany, and on Randy's word, Ole wanted me to come in and start right away. Right.
Yeah.
And then Ole got fired, and then all the paperwork got pushed to the bottom. So then I had to go in and then do the dark match for Dusty and everything like that. And he was in the process of just taking over because he had to finish his New York contract because he did that. His last thing he did was Royal Rumble, right? And he had to finish that. And I think that year was January 17th. And while he was doing that, I was that Saturday I had my dark match. He saw the video and says, "All right, sit tight. We're going to use you." And I thought my dark match sucked, but they were impressed, And I was used to working in 20-foot rings, and back then the NWA had WCW had 2-foot smaller rings, and it just threw my timing off. If you know about timing is everything in the industry, and it just threw my timing off. So I threw the guy into the ropes. I went to jump up for my drop kick. I was high, but my knees hit him in the chest instead of my feet because that 2 feet makes a big difference when you're throwing somebody off the ropes.
Yeah, I can imagine. So there is one match. There's a few things I want to talk around your WCW run, obviously, but there is one match which I'm sure you get asked about a lot, and you're probably sick to death of talking about it.
Every time. I know what you're going to do. Let me wait a minute. The Scaffold Match. Is that what you want to ask me?
Yeah.
I knew it. I get it asked about it every time. I wonder if the other guys get hassled with this match. I mean, no, it is one of my least favorite matches I've ever been involved with, and I'll tell you why. Well, they forgot to order the scaffolding. Right. So the grips and everything like that, they had to do a makeshift scaffolding, and they made it 3 stories high. Normally somebody's supposed to drop off of it, and even Bobby, when Dusty pulled us all in, he goes, "Guys, I'm sorry." I give him that. He apologized, right? But and he told us what happened, and he said, "But here's the deal. What are we gonna do?" Because and Bobby Eaton goes, "I'll do the drop." And Bobby's a trooper, right? I mean, I'd have probably broke the ring, broke my legs, broke my hips, broke everything, went straight through the concrete. And Bobby said, he says, no, we're not going to have to do that. And that's where the flags came up on each corner and stuff like that. I mean, talk about talent. I mean, it's not like there wasn't any talent there. It was it was a difficult situation.
I watched a bit of it again last night, and it just looks awkward. I think
it is awkward.
It's an interesting concept, one that you can kind of knit into a professional
if you're doing it properly, if you're doing it the proper one where it's only a story above the ring.
Yeah.
Heck, I used to do coal miners glove matches and stuff like that where I'd take the bump off the top of the ring, and I did the shanton. I said I'd have no problem doing that if I was hanging from the thing and doing the fall. I'd have done that without a problem. But it was literally 2-3 stories above the ring.
Yeah,
it's an had to keep it out because they couldn't move it. They had to make it extra high. So it didn't affect the rest of the show. We were like the first match on the card. First televised match on the card. And I don't, and I'm not a fan of putting a match on just to put a match on. there was no story behind it. It was just putting 3 middle card guys in there all together and trying to make it work. You ask any of the people I've ever taught in this business that I'm a fan of story, of telling a story, and there was no story behind that. How do you do that? It's like just putting a 3-way dance on without a belt or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's no story to it. If there's no heat, how do you do something like that?
That was going to be my next question, actually, it's an interesting concept on its own, but again, you pretty much answered actually that there wasn't a story knitting it together.
You're welcome.
So thanks for that. But it's not being funny, but somebody your size as well. I know you were agile in the ring and you did stuff off the top and everything, but
I don't know. Maybe I'm probably the heaviest guy who's ever done a scaffold match. It was I in one way you got to look at it as a compliment because they put me in a match where they thought I could handle it. You know what I mean? In one way, it was a tough situation because with it could have been so much better. I suppose, but. The fact that I have to be remembered for a scaffold match, I've done so many more things that outside of the WCW that were so much more interesting and so much more fun, and where we actually drew money, the old-fashioned way by putting asses in seats, not using television.
The interesting thing as well, you say obviously you're on the opening match, and that's the one that you're remembered for. Is over here when I got the VHS in the UK of Great American Bash, that match isn't on it.
Great.
I suppose so. But it's like I'd heard about this match, but I could never watch it. It was later years that I finally was able to track it down. It's got a bit of a cult following, I suppose.
Damn the internet.
You can't get away from any bad match.
You can't, man. It doesn't matter, right?
But I need to ask as well, what was it like working with Steve Austin, knowing what he's become? I mean, obviously this was at the
everybody knew he was going to be a big star. Everybody knew he had talent. I think at the time he was 2 or 3 years in the business, and everybody knew he was going to be big. I maybe had I probably had 1 or 2 more years, and I had a hell of a lot more experience because I was wrestling in Europe. And when I was out in Portland, I was wrestling 7 days a week. When I got to Europe, I was wrestling 7 days a week, At that time, England, you do the summer run in England and you're doing 14 to 17 shows in a week. I had a lot more experience, but everybody knew the talent that he had going on. There's no question about it. We all knew he was going to be a big thing. We were all confident.
Yeah, you could argue. I think in his run through WCW, he just got stronger and stronger and stronger, and then it's got to a point they didn't really seem to know what to do with him.
Well, the thing is once he got to be, he was doing the other gimmick beforehand, but once he got to be the character he wanted to be, then it was fantastic. It's like me when I'm in Europe, I'm doing Cannonball Grizzly, right? My Cannonball Grizzly stuff is way stronger than my P.N. Neu stuff because that was me. That was my character.
Okay.
I was most comfortable in, and that was, if you ever watch any of my Cannonball Grizzly stuff, you'll see that it's just a much more positive, not positive, negative. I was villain, I was babyface, whatever. It doesn't matter. But the character was just better because I was comfortable in my own skin more so than I was. I wanted that P.N. Neu's gimmick to be a heel gimmick, and they wanted it to be babyface.
Okay.
And I would, and I would have been a hell of a lot more comfortable as a heel. It's harder to be a babyface, and it was later in my earlier in my days, I had to work as a babyface. I would have preferred getting a run as a heel and then turning babyface. I started learning how to work babyface later on in my career. I really felt comfortable with it as my P.N. Neu's character, or not as my P.N. Neu's character, but as my Cannonball Grizzly character.
Right.
And that's when I really felt, because it was just, that's who I was. I was Cannonball Grizzly. That I identify. Some people identify as cats. Some people identify as girls when they're boys and boys when they're girls. I identify as Cannonball Grizzly more than I do P.N. Neu.
That's cool. I mean, that fully explains then, the difference in, like you say, if it's a more effective persona, really, because you've got you're fully invested in it rather than trying to force it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One interesting story I came across when I was sort of looking around again, the internet, surrounds the one-man gang in WCW. I don't know if you can shed any light on this. Apparently he was fired in 91 for not wanting to put you over.
Right. Yeah, it's true. And he said it was one of his regrets. And I didn't hold nothing against him for that. I mean, people do that for all time. He didn't know me. And I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of people don't know that shit happens backstage, and I'm 100% confident. And I'll tell you another story. So, but to the point is, he got wound up backstage by some guys, and then he said, "Oh, okay." When the boss came in and asked him to do the job, then he didn't want to do the job because he got wound up. He got himself wound up by some of the boys, right? Yeah. And then later on in his life, he met some of my buddies who said, "Hey, News is pretty cool, man. He's not what you think he was." And then and I heard he said that was one of his regrets. Well, I never held it against him in the first place.
No.
And the story I wanted to tell you, I'll give you an example. First time I worked Stan Hansen was in St. Louis. It was in a tag match, right? Mm-hmm. And it was Owen Hart. Owen Hart was, had a short run there in WCW at the time. Yeah. And Owen was waiting when Stan came late. He came from the airport. He just flew in from Japan, and he goes, "Hey man, it's a shame about that news. What did he do? What did he do?" "Oh, fucking kid said, I got to work with that old man." So, and I would never say that about Stan Hansen. I got nothing but respect for the guy. He was great. He never hurt me, but boy, he's got a motor, and he just came in from Japan. And I'll tell you what, he schooled me on how to have a motor. I'll tell you that, man. I was huffing and puffing after just a couple minutes,
Oh, no.
But yeah, I found out later, who the culprit was, and I got no hard feelings to either one, right?
No.
Stan didn't stiff me or anything like that. He just showed me, "I'll show you who's an old man." You know what I mean? And that was good for him. Yeah. Good on him. Yeah. I've done that. I did that, later on in my career with a guy in Austria, a guy named Victor Kruger. I ate his lunch. We were doing match. We were in 15 minutes, and I'm doing jumping jacks while he's down there blowing out his ass. Yeah,
it's great. You command that respect later on in your career. You can still do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing. Those kind of things happen, and it is what it is. And the boys, nobody. There's an old thing when you were doing those old TVs and there was like 24 matches in a day. A lot of guys would be in the back watching the monitor, right? If you went out there and everybody was watching the monitor, and when you came back, nobody was watching the monitor, is because you did something that was really good, and nobody wanted to have to congratulate you and tell you, "Hey, good job," right?
See.
And that's the ego of the business, That's everybody. There's you got a dressing room full of egos, and nobody ever wants to tell anybody that they did a great job, right? Yeah. Nobody wants to do that, right? So
why not? Why not? I don't understand it, but there we go.
Yeah. You see, I'll say, "Hey, Chris, great job." I'm lying to you right now. No,
thanks.
No, but the thing is, there's a lot of egos. If you want to be the best,
yeah,
a lot of the time it's hard for you to admit somebody just stole the show.
Quite.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And that is the worst thing. It's the worst thing you can do is have to admit, you stole the show. But I never feared that kind of thing. For me, It was not. I don't know. I've got an ego. Don't get me wrong. I got a tremendous ego, but I enjoyed being entertained, man. And it didn't bother me. I'd tell people when I thought they had a great match.
Yeah.
I'd tell them when they had a crappy match too. But
you think you can be honest about this, especially when you're having to work and put your trust in these people.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I'm sure I rubbed a lot of guys the wrong way, but I wasn't trying to be mean. I wanted them to learn from their own mistakes, because if they come out thinking, "Well, that was great," and it was actually crap, then I'm doing them a disservice, because they're not going to learn from anything themselves.
Exactly.
Right? And I'm doing the business a disservice, So if I'm telling a guy he's great and he's crap, then the business is paying my wages. I'm doing the whole thing a disservice, so I'm not helping myself out, right?
Exactly. Final little WCW thing, and then we'll move on. This is more of a personal thing, to be fair. So I remember I had there was a book that I was bought when I was a kid. It was a WCW fact file. It was almost like just like a book of profiles for all the superstars, and you were in there. And that was really where I first saw you, because again, for some reason, some of your matches on the pay-per-views, when we got them over here, they weren't on there. So I didn't get to see you, except when Worldwide, I think, came onto UK TV. I or whatever it was back then. I saw some of the syndicated shows. I got to see you on there. The look of your attire, your whole gimmick, was what really drew me in, because it was that age of the real kind of in-your-face, really colourful characters. Like I said at the beginning, you're a big guy, so you're very sort of command a lot of attention. I wanted one of the things I always wanted them to bring out was a WCW Galoob figure of you. It was because I had like Elegante and we had Dustin Rhodes and things, or those kind of mid-card guys that you were working with. And I recently found out that they did actually have a prototype to do one.
Yeah, they did have a prototype. It had three different poses, and it was for release actually only in the UK, because I guess the character was really huge, and it was going to be like in a box set of figures, right? And it was for release in the UK. There are 5 prototypes out there, and it's actually one of those prototypes was sold as the most expensive wrestling figure of all time.
Wow.
Yeah. They go for, I know somebody tried to sell me one of them for 500 quid a while back. Right. And that was 6 or 7 years ago. And he had 2 of them.
Wow.
So, and I think the one went on eBay for over $1,700. So at the time, I don't know, there could be one more that's more expensive, but at the time it was the most expensive wrestling figure of all time. So it'll probably be that way, because I mean, people were making 3D copies, but it's not the same as the original Galoob figures. So, and there's only 5 of those out. So there always will only be 5 of those Galoob figures, and maybe one of them has been destroyed by now, which makes the price of the other ones go up. So
that's got to be pretty cool, knowing that you.
That's my bigger claim to fame than the scaffolding match.
And I would love to be able to lay my hands on one of those, because you hear about, I think, going over to the WWF, the Hasbro ones, you've got the really rare ones like Adam Bomb and the 1-2-3 Kid and whatever. But I don't know, I absolutely love the Galoob figures, because they seem to be indestructible. And
exactly. And then, but like I said, I knew a guy that had 2 of them, and I said, you know what, I'm just not gonna pay for it.
That's insane. I don't think my wife would ever be happy with me paying that amount of money.
If you put that kind of money out, right?
Yeah, I think.
Why wouldn't she? There's value in it, because eventually I'm going to die. You're obviously younger than me.
Yeah.
And then your investment would have been worth it. It'll be like a bar of gold at that point.
Maybe trying to convince other people of that at the minute, though, is probably not. Don't really work.
Yeah, well, I suppose during these tough times, it might be a different story.
Maybe
right?
We'll see out the other side. I might get lucky.
Yeah, but like I said, only 5 of them out there, so
that's awesome.
That's a cool thing, man.
That's brilliant. So on from WCW, I know then another thing that I found interesting when we first messaged each other. I know that you did a lot of work in Europe and over here in the UK. You actually mentioned that you wrestled in Basingstoke, which is my hometown.
Absolutely. Isn't Basingstoke where the smallest bar in the world is, the smallest pub in the world is?
I don't know if it is. I need
Corn Palace. It's across from the Corn Palace. I was drinking in the place.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was Basingstoke, because it's Cornhall or Cornhall, right? Isn't it called the Cornhall?
I have not. To be fair, I didn't know. I grew up there. I didn't know a lot about.
I'm pretty sure it's called the Cornhall, and we were wrestling there. And right across the street is I had to turn sideways. The doors weren't full. It was like 2 really tiny doors that I had to open up both doors to get in there. Right.
Right.
And there's enough room to I had to turn around. I had to go back out and then come back in, so I could get a seat practically. But it was the smallest. I loved it. I
Have a
enjoyed
look.
it. I got over real good in that little bar, man. I
I'm
can't imagine
gonna
they made a lot of money.
I'm gonna have a look at that. But do you remember any particular memories that have sat with you about your time wrestling over here in the UK?
Oh, loads of them, loads of them. I work for All Star Promotion. Brian Dixon. So, for I had a 20-year relationship with All Star. So
Okay.
it's longer. And it was good. Some of it good, some of it bad. But I remember going up and down the road doing Butlins. My some of the most impressive things. One of the most impressive things is it was back in. It was back in the 90s, and it was after the stadium was torn down in Liverpool, because there used to be a boxing stadium where they did the wrestling matches, and they hadn't had wrestling in ages. So they went into St. George's Hall, and my match, I had to wrestle giant haystacks on that bill.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
and I'll tell you what, they turned a crowd of 500 people away outside.
Wow.
Right, the place was packed out. Brian Dixon was sending his daughter home a couple different carloads full of merchandise. He was selling so much merch that night, right? Maybe I shouldn't say that loud. Tax guys might be after us. Oops.
Sorry.
No, but anyway,
listen to this.
the thing is, yeah. But the thing is, it was just, that was pretty impressive. I loved wrestling in England. The fans were so appreciative back in the 90s. The early 2000s were just really, really outstanding. It was good.
That's
and
cool.
Then I went up and down doing all these holiday camps like Butlins and Taunton and all those things. They were that became a mainstay for a long time. I really England was a lot of fun, and a lot of the guys know me as a big cider drinker because I hated the beer, and bitter was just horrible. So like, if I was drinking, it was usually Strongbow or something like that. So
you next time you're over here, did you ever come down as far as sort of the southwest, down Devon and Cornwall at all?
Of course I did.
So I live in Devon, so I was going to say,
you're down there now.
It's definitely cider country down there.
Well, Cornwall, and we got posties there, right? So we got Cornwall. And then isn't Minehead part of Cornwall?
Minehead's Somerset, so it's the next one up from Devon, but still southwest.
But down there. No, what's Torquay?
Torquay, Torquay's like 7 miles away from where I live. I'm in Newton Abbot.
Loads of times in Torquay.
Okay. That's insane.
I got down there.
That's brilliant.
I loved it down there. It's probably it's some of the most beautiful country in all of England, And I mean, people can say what they want about England, but it is a beautiful country. There's a lot of green, and Great Britain in general, man. I love going to Scotland, love going to Wales. I had a lot of good memories there. Met a lot of good people. Got to wrestle a lot of good talent, and
that's great. There's one guy I've had on my show before, which I will just quickly ask, because he did mention you in our interview. Because we were talking about it's Jeff Bearden, who
I know Jeff.
Because he mentioned, because he was working for Ricky Knight up in WAW, and I think, was it you two? He was their first world champion, and he beat you.
Yeah, he was, and then he put me over for the title after him. I was their second and stuff like that. Yeah. I did some matches with him on the Isle of Man, and we worked all over the country for Brian and stuff. We lived together for a while, and Jeff is he's a big guy, man.
Yeah.
A genuine 7-footer.
He is. Yeah, he was such a delight to talk to. He had so many stories, and
really nice guy.
He was. He gave one story. He divulged that he was sadly one of the ones who found Yokozuna when he passed over here.
That's right, and that's the thing. And I had actually been back in the States, and I was working for ECW at the time, and then I didn't even know about Yokozuna, but I just got back in touch with Brian because I'd worked for him in the 90s, and he said, "Listen, I need a big man. We just lost both Yokozuna there in the moat," and then I was seeing a girl at the moat for a little while, and she ended up giving me tickets to a Liverpool match, and I sat in the top end, and that's how I became a Liverpool fan, and I've supported them ever since.
Oh, okay, that's interesting as well.
Yeah, up the Reds.
Up the Reds. They finally got there. Was it last year? I think.
Last year they were pushing on the door for a couple of years. It's been good. They won the Champions League again. And,
that's right. COVID got in the way of they delayed their title win.
Oh,
didn't it, a little bit?
Dude, Anfield is not the same without without the 11th man, which is the crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go into that stadium and you got everybody. At the time there's like 48,000 people went in there, and like 40,000 of them are all singing You'll Never Walk Alone. It just gives you goose pimples. I got them right now just thinking about it. It's the atmosphere, and I played American football over here, college football. University of Nebraska is like a huge college team, and that is one of the greatest feelings that you're ever going to have when you go to that stadium, 80,000 people all wearing red and white screaming for the Huskers.
Yeah.
And European football is just completely different. I went to a lot of Bundesliga games when I was in Germany, Bundesliga in Austria and stuff like that, and I could never get into it. And then when I got those tickets to the Liverpool game, I went with the Liverpool supporter, Frankie Sloan. I'm sure you've heard of him. Frankie Sloan, I took him to the game with me, and I've never looked back. And now I enjoy watching. I'll say it for the Americans out there, soccer. You know what I mean? But but football, as the English would say. So.
I haven't been a football fan probably since my kids came along, because I just wasn't able to keep up with it. But I was a Tottenham Hotspur fan back in the day. So,
I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, for my sins. My sister was a big Liverpool fan when I was at home though, because Michael Owen was her like hero. So
I like that. I mean, he was playing. He was on top right there when I first saw that first game. And the funny thing about it is that first game, Julio was on charge, and the game I went to was a 0-0 draw against Middlesbrough.
God.
And it was just boring, but Fowler got on the pitch, and Gerrard was a young lad, and it's like 2001, right? So So I've been a supporter for 20 years, man. It was good stuff. Good stuff.
All right, digging into your past one final time before finding out what you're up to these days. I've got to ask, you were at ECW for a little while, a short stint. Any memories there? What was it like?
Chaotic. It was chaotic. There was a lot of good talent there. It was chaotic. It was hard getting paid. Paulie, a genius. He's a genius about the business. My only thing, it was all hardcore, so it was just overkill. You know what I mean? You can't. From top to bottom, it was just, and then he tried to make the show like one continuous match, which is cool. I like the concept was good, but when it's like going to a lot of action movies nowadays. It's just non-start, stop to finish. It's all action, but there's no content. There's no really good story.
No.
But I got to work with Van Damme, Sabu, Mike Awesome, good talent. I got to work Rhino. I was part of the Baldies, good friend of mine, Vito Legasso. He was one of my tag team partners, and I mean, I got to work a lot of good talent there. So there's no question it was good, but I got to get my hips replaced, and that was the first time where I started having problems with my hips. So I mean, I would literally go into a closed toilet and tie my boots because I was in so much pain putting my boots on. I wouldn't let anybody see me tie my boots because of the pain I was in. So
did they get you to do much of the really crazy stuff there? Obviously, going through tables and that is fairly. I was going through tables. I was doing all sorts of stuff. I was taking power bombs through tables off the top rope. I have a scar on the back of my head where a knee jack came off second story balcony in Marietta, Georgia, at a theater there,
and the table leg came up through the press board, and it ripped a hole in the back of my head. I still got the lump back there in the back of my head. I always got to watch it when I'm shaving and stuff. So, but I mean, no complaints. I mean, wrestling isn't ballet, and it's, you know, there's a lot of you know,
risks
you
involved.
know, everybody that's in the business can't really complain, because you're gonna get injuries, and I carried a lot of them. Sometimes people knew about it. Sometimes I just kept my mouth shut and just kept working, because shit happened.
Yeah, no, definitely. At least you live to tell the tale, I suppose. It's the main
I'm
thing.
still around. I can say more than that. I didn't get really involved with all the pharmaceuticals or anything like that. So you know, knock on wood. I mean, I'm okay for a big man. I don't have diabetes. I don't have anything serious, and I still enjoy a bottle of wine.
Cool.
Every other day or so. So
yeah,
kind
of need it at the minute.
Yeah, right now. That's the one thing I still deal with a lot of pain, but I do need to I can get some surgeries done, and it's just a matter of time before I do that. It's just that I've always been so busy. Once I got out of the business, I was doing something else, and to feed the family or to just stay alive, you got to keep working, right? So sometimes you can't take the time off and get the operations that are needed, but soon, this year.
Cool. And brings me quite nicely actually onto the final sort of part of the interview then. What you're up to at the minute, because I believe you're not exactly even though you're pretty much locked down over there in Germany, you're still got things on the go. So
yes, yeah. I right now what we've done, we're in the process. We've got a performance center down in Dubai. It's United Wrestling Nations, or Ultimate Wrestling Nations is what it's called. And you can find us at ultimatewrestlingNationsDubai.com. And the performance center is up and running. We got Frank Chick Cullen down there as one of the students, one of the trainers. The Beast from the East. He's a Lebanese. Beast from the Middle East. He's a Lebanese Canadian who's down there training students. We've got a few people involved. We got some names that are going to be coming along when the TV production starts. And we're going to be starting production. It's going to be a Middle East based program, but we're going to have stars coming from all over the world. And they, the prices are relatively good, and you can go down there and you can get trained. They'll put you up. You can get trained, and then you can do it in the sun and fun. It's better than doing it up in Michigan, I'm sure, because you don't have to deal with cold, just saying, or doing it up in Canada or something like that.
Yeah,
and it's going to be a really good atmosphere. We plan on going into 15 of the Gulf Coast Gulf states and stuff like that. Yeah. It's going to be based on nations. It's all in the name, so you can either enjoy your favorite wrestler, or you can support your favorite nation. And we plan on growth from there. And I'm going to be involved with production, and I'm also, guys, if there's any wrestlers that know me, they should go ahead and try and contact me. Or they can go ahead and contact the website if they're interested in a career with the UWN of Dubai, because we're going to grow. It's going to be huge. I feel really confident about it. I'm scouting Europe at the moment, trying to find all the best talent here. We've got scouts in England. We got Ted DiBiase's going to be involved. Mark Henry's going to be involved. Vito LaGrasso is going to be involved. Dave Taylor. Like I said, I mentioned Frank Chick Cullen. He's involved. Scottish lad. And a few other names, and we'll be able to mention a few names, but we should have a date set for our TV within the next couple months. So our TVs will start, and then we're gonna run a TV program down there. There'll be a live show every month, and then there'll be some tape shows, and then every 3 months we'll go in there and we'll go out of Dubai. We'll work a tour, and there'll be a total of at least 60 shows a year that are going to be in the Middle East, and then we're going to grow from there. So.
That's amazing. Oh wow! Is that going to be available sort of on TV around the world, or is it over there?
We're gonna plan on growth and everything like that. But we're gonna start there, and we're gonna start there, and then we're gonna grow exponentially. I have a feeling it's gonna be good.
It's amazing.
It's a market, it's a niche, it's a market in Dubai and in the Middle East. The number one sport of interest is football, and then right after that is professional wrestling. So there's a huge niche for it there, and with it starting out as a local product, but you're going to have international world talent, some of those guys out of Japan, Mexico, Canada, US, ex-WWE guys, other talent out of Europe that we're going to find. And I know that we're going to use a lot of talent out of Europe, because there's a lot of talent in Europe that doesn't get the opportunity to do the job in America, because it's a lot easier being an American to get a run in the WWE than it is for a European. But this is an opportunity for Europeans and kids out of the Middle East, and kids from different areas to get their foot in the door and become international superstars, and we're going to push it hard.
Fantastic. Was this something that you were involved in starting up, or something you were approached about?
I'm one of the earlier guys that was called into the fold, and I'm proud to be a part of it, and I'm glad that somebody believed in me. It was Frank Chick Cohen that got a hold of me, and I'm glad that he believed in me enough to say, hey, you got way too much knowledge to waste, and we want you to be a part of this. And for me, it was huge. Because it's huge. I mean, this is a dream job. I've run a few of my own shows in the past in Europe, Austria, Germany, and Denmark, and stuff like that. And this is just, and in the United States, and this is just a great opportunity to pass on my knowledge and try to help new young talent be the best that they can be.
Awesome. No, I cannot wait to see what happens with that. So you've already let people know where they can find it. Just one more time.
It's uwanddubai.com. If they go on there, they can learn a little bit about the training facility and everything down there. We got 32,000 square feet, 2 swimming pools, 2 20-foot rings. We got weights. We got a sauna down there. We're in the Fitness for Life building down there, and I mean, I'm telling you, and we've got personal trainers. We've got nutrition people. This is a performance center. It's not just a wrestling school. It is a true performance center, and they can learn from some of the greatest talents of that. That some of them will be known to them, and others won't. But they're going to teach them the best way and best form of wrestling. And I love the European style. I've always been a fan of British wrestling and everything. I like the European style, and they're going to learn a really, good groundwork and everything like that. They're not just going to learn how to fly off the top rope. They're going to be, when they get older, like as every wrestler does, and they're going to have to keep their feet on the ground a little bit more. They're going to have the background to continue their career and continue making money as long as they can.
Awesome. Where can people find you, just quickly, if they want to?
They can find me on Facebook at Paul Neu, NEU, and they can also find me on Twitter. I'm at the Real P.N. News on Twitter, and I think I'm Paul Neu on Twitter as well. So I don't use Twitter as much. Eventually, I'll start using it a little bit more as the company grows. But if somebody needs to get in touch with me, they can get me on Messenger, Facebook, Paul Neu. That'd be the easiest way to get in touch with me directly.
I'll put those details on the notes as well for this episode. So one final question. I cannot let you go without asking you this, because I ask this of all the guests, especially those who have been in the ring. If you could have been at a WrestleMania, I know you weren't in the WWF, but had other things happened and you could have placed yourself at a WrestleMania in one match, who would it have been against?
Oh, that's a weird. I Andre the Giant. Who else? I mean, why wouldn't it have been? Andre the Giant would have been great. That guy was. He's the most awesome wrestler of all time. You'd have to say. Either him or Fit Finlay, and you know what I mean. Fit Finlay is probably one of the guys that once I got into wrestling, I was influenced a lot by Fit. I thought he he is one of the most talented guys that I've ever seen in the business. He's forgotten more than I've even learned. And other than that, I mean, Andre the Giant. God, who would want to be in WrestleMania against Andre the Giant? You know, the payday is going to be a hell of a payday, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, just going up against that guy, God.
That would have been one for the ages. I would love to see that.
It definitely would have been one for my ages.
Yeah.
It would have been fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome.
Can't
Listen,
think of anybody else.
this has been an absolute blast. I know you're a very busy man, so I am going to let you go in a second. But I just want to say,
podcast. I got another one coming up here.
Thank you for sparing your time. This has been a fantastic walk down memory lane.
Chris, I appreciate you having me on. Maybe we can do another one once we're up and running and stuff like that. Let's come back, touch base again.
Absolutely.
You got my contact. Also, if anybody wants to send me any propaganda, like their info and a CV or something like that, they can send it to cballgrizz@gmail.com.
Awesome.
Okay.
Can I get a yo baby yo, because I butchered yours at the
Chris,
beginning.
just for you, yo baby yo.
There we go.
Thank
Paul
you,
Neu, everyone. Thank you
Have
so
a great one,
much.
buddy.
And you, bud. Thank
Later.
you. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Once Upon a Turnbuckle to keep updated about all future shows.